Let's be honest. The self-improvement world can be a lot sometimes. We've got all these gurus and life hacks and apps for absolutely everything.
It can be overwhelming, that's for sure.
Totally. So we thought, why not go straight to the source? The people.
Yeah.
For this deep dive, we're going right into the Reddit trenches.
What are we diving into exactly?
We found this thread asking, what's your #1 self-improvement tip? And the responses are amazing.
Wow, so we're talking like crowdsourced wisdom here.
Exactly. It's like a massive guide to a better life, all from Redditors. And don't worry, we've sifted through it all, so you don't have to.
I appreciate that. So what are some of the themes that came up?
Well, one that kept popping up was this idea of perspective. Like not sweating the small stuff, remembering that we're often way harder on ourselves than anyone else is.
Oh, absolutely. It's so easy to get caught up in our own heads.
Right. Like one top-rated comment said something like, remember that you think about yourself way more than anyone else ever will. And it's so true.
It is. There's a real psychological truth there. We tend to overestimate how much others notice our flaws or mistakes. We think everyone's watching our every move, but they're really not.
Oh, I am so guilty of this. One time I spilled coffee on myself right before a big presentation.
Oh, no.
I was mortified. I was sure everyone would be staring at the giant brown stain, but you know what?
Right.
No one even mentioned it.
That's exactly it. Our insecurities feel so much bigger and more noticeable to us than they do to anyone else. And that kind of self-scrutiny can be paralyzing.
It's true. You're so worried about what other people think that you end up not doing anything at all.
Exactly. It keeps us from taking risks, from putting ourselves out there. But imagine if we could just quiet that inner critic a little bit.
Oh, that would be life-changing.
What if instead of obsessing over what others might think, we focused on what really matters to us? That's where real growth happens.
And a lot of Redditors said that even just making that small mindset shift had a huge impact on their lives.
It makes so much sense though, right?
They were less self-conscious, more willing to try new things, less afraid of making mistakes.
It's about recognizing that our flaws are rarely as significant to others as they are to us. Once you free yourself from that fear of judgment, it can be so empowering.
And speaking of taking action, another big theme was the power of discipline.
Ah, discipline. The not-so-sexy cousin of motivation.
Right. But maybe the more important one in the long run.
Definitely. Because while motivation might get you started, discipline is what keeps you going when the excitement wears off.
100%. And it's something that a lot of the Redditors echoed, especially when it came to like breaking bad habits or establishing healthier ones.
Makes sense. That's where you really need that consistency.
Because we've all been there, right? We start the year like, this is it. This is the year I finally write that novel. But then life happens.
And those grand plans just kind of fizzle. So that's where that discipline comes in. It's less about relying on willpower, which can be so fleeting, and more about making those positive choices automatic.
So it's more about building systems and routines.
Exactly. Like one Redditor perfectly summed it up. Discipline is simply remembering what you truly want.
And it's interesting you say that, remembering what you truly want, because that seems to tie in with another big theme, visualizing your future self.
Oh yeah, I love that.
It was more than just setting goals, right?
Yeah.
It was about connecting with that future version of yourself.
Totally. Like it's one thing to say, I want to be healthier, but it hits different when you actually picture your future self like 5 years from now. Full of energy, thanking you for making healthy choices today.
It's like you're accountable to that future you.
Exactly. And some Redditors talked about specific ways to do this, like writing letters to their future selves, almost like a check-in point.
Oh, that's cool. I like that.
Others mentioned creating vision boards with pictures of their ideal future.
So you're surrounding yourself with those visuals.
And what's fascinating is there's actually some psychology behind this.
Really?
Studies have shown that people who feel more connected to their future selves tend to make healthier choices in the present.
Oh, wow. So it actually works.
It's like bridging that gap between what we want and actually doing it.
Because, yeah, we all have those moments where it's like, should I eat the cookie dough or should I go for a run?
Exactly. But picturing that future you, the one who's going to benefit from those healthy choices, it can make all the difference.
It's like that future you is cheering you on in the present.
And speaking of things that can help us grow, another theme was growth mindset. This idea that we're not defined by what we can do right now, but by our potential to learn and improve.
Yes, love that. Talking about learning new skills, getting over setbacks, going for goals that seemed impossible.
Because it's about seeing challenges as opportunities rather than threats.
Exactly.
And there's so much research to back this up. People with growth mindset, they're more resilient, more likely to take on those challenges, and ultimately more successful in the long run.
They don't see setbacks as failures. It's more like, okay, what can I learn from this?
Exactly. It's that classic fall down 7 times, get up.
And the Redditors definitely embodied that, sharing stories about finally mastering a coding language after months of struggling or running that marathon after years of trying.
It's pretty amazing what we can achieve when we set our minds to it.
And don't forget about self-care.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Can't forget about self-care.
Because you can't really show up for any of this stuff, the growth that challenges the goals, if you're totally burned out.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. And I have to admit, this is a tough one for me. I'm kind of bad at prioritizing my own needs, always putting pressure on myself to achieve, to be on all the time.
It's so easy to fall into that trap, though, especially these days.
Right.
But the Redditors had some good tips for this, too. One that kept coming up was scheduling quiet time, especially in the mornings.
Interesting. Seems to be a theme here. Small, consistent actions, right? Building those habits, whether it's visualizing your future self, practicing discipline, or prioritizing self-care, it's those small moments that really add up.
Totally. It's like creating that space for yourself.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
amidst all the chaos, even a few minutes just to breathe, to be present, it can make such a difference.
Totally. And I loved some self-care tips, like setting boundaries with work emails at night.
Oh, yeah.
Scheduling time for hobbies, or even just saying no to things that drain you.
Sometimes that's the hardest one, right? Saying no.
Right. But it's so important.
Because self-care isn't selfish. It's essential. It's not always about spa days or anything like that. It's about those little things you do for yourself consistently.
Totally. So you can show up as your best self.
Exactly.
And isn't that kind of the point of all of this?
Yeah.
Showing up.
100%. For ourselves, for others, for our goals.
And that brings us to action.
It's about bridging that gap, right, between knowing and doing.
Exactly. And Reddit, once again, came through with the wisdom.
Oh, I bet they did. Lay it on me.
The phrase that kept popping up was, just start.
Love that.
Don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect plan. Just take that first step, even if it's tiny.
Because action creates momentum, right?
Exactly. And even those small actions, when you do them consistently, they build up to something amazing.
It's like that saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Yes. And the Redditors totally got that. They weren't afraid to experiment, to mess up, to iterate.
It's all part of the process.
Exactly. And speaking of learning, before we wrap things up, I wanted to share just little things that really resonated with me.
I'm all ears.
Okay, so this one was simple but powerful. What would someone who loves themselves do?
Oh, I love that. So good.
Right. Especially when you're facing a tough decision.
It helps you reframe things. Instead of acting from a place of fear or self-doubt, you're choosing from a place of self-love.
Yes. Okay, and this next one really hit home for me too. Don't lie. Also, don't talk behind people's backs.
So true. Simple, but so important.
Right. It's about living with integrity, being kind to others and to yourself.
And ultimately, that's what brings peace of mind, right? Knowing you're living in line with your values.
Exactly. Okay, last one, and this one's for anyone who's feeling overwhelmed or discouraged. It's okay if it takes time. Time will pass anyway.
Ooh, yeah. Good one.
Right. Just a reminder to be patient with yourself. Embrace the journey.
And celebrate how far you've come.
Because self-improvement isn't a race, right? It's a lifelong thing. And like we've learned from the amazing Redditors out there, it's often the small steps, the little things we do every day that make the biggest difference in the long run.
So choose one thing, one small action you can take today to move towards your best self. And then do it again tomorrow and the next day. You got this.